Hey tubers, welcome back for another adventure. This is the 1998 Honda TRX300EX that I bought up in Adams, Massachusetts. And when I got it, it was a non-runner. And to bring it to the point of running is one thing. To bring it to the point where it's reliable enough to turn into a daily driver is quite another. Something you can walk right up to, start, and drive. So we discovered we had a missing power wire up to the starter switch, so we fixed that. And now we have, when you turn the power on, right, you get the light, and then, you know, high and low beam on the headlight if there was one in there, right? This lamp was dead. So we did that last time, and now what we want to do is get it running properly. I got to set up the camera to do this because it takes starting fluid and everything else. But let me show you how the engine runs and what we have to do to fix it to get it to run right. So here we are. I just want you to be able to see the end of the tailpipe when I start it up. This thing seems to want starting fluid to start up. So let's give it a little hoot of that to start right off with. And power on the portable CDI box, power on the bike, and yeah, she's far from a daily rider at this point. Now the problem it has, if you remember the last time I started it up, it just seems to be running crazy rich, right? And given that it's like never gonna start properly. One more time. Yeah, the gas is on. I think it completely flooded out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take that air cleaner off and we'll give it another try, see if it'll fire. Alright, the air cleaner's off. Let's see what it's going to want to do. CDI box is on, ignition is on. Sometimes it takes a mist. So at this point, this thing seems to be crazy flooded. I'm going to pull the carburetor off. Let's see what we could do with it. Well, I've been avoiding this, but to get to the carburetor, the gas tank and plastic all need to come off, so no use being lazy. Might as well get right to it. Gas tank off, plastic off, check, check. Clamp, Phillips head, take those off, wiggle the carburetor out. Whenever you're working on an all-terrain vehicle, there should be a few things that you're noticing. Try to be awake and all. First of all, you could see by the leftover material here, somebody had been in there. So that's one thing I noticed. While I was on that side of the engine, I noticed that the reverse cable is disconnected. Then I just noticed it's missing here too. So, you know, keep your eyes open and make life easier for the future. To finish taking the carburetor off, once you wiggle it loose, you get these two out of here. And beneath the cover, you'll see where the throttle cable hooks up. By the way, I also noticed that this is for adjusting the idle, and it's also kind of wrecked. Right. This is a original carburetor. You can see it's a Kevin made in Japan. So you always try to keep that stuff. I obviously can convert it to a PZ27. A little less of a need because it has the electric start, right? I don't have to be kicking it all over the place. By pulling this upward and sliding that little eye out right there, you could get the cable off of it. Then you can spin this out and the carburetor is loose. You can come up with a tray and do a rebuild. Here we have the carburetor, and things are already getting interesting. I'm not thinking that's OEM. Normally the OEM bolts look more like that guy. So somehow or another they lost 3 out of 4 of them, and they went with the wood screws. Carburetor is opened up, and you guys could see it's really nice and clean. Obviously it's got a fuel pump. Right there is a one-way valve. I mean, one could check to see if that little ball is working properly. Probably this one is not one you want to keep flicking the throttle as you're trying to start it, because you'll flood it out like I did. And the carburetor itself, I mean, it looks like it's there. I don't see anything missing. I really expected to see, if you look in this side, and if you look at the bottom where the slide goes, right, there's that little brass thing. I thought maybe that was missing, because I've made that mistake before and it ran rich. So I'm not quite sure what to do with this carburetor. I know, send it to me, I'll take it for free, but I think I have another one floating around. My lean is to put a fresh one on it so that this thing has the best chance of running properly. And what's the use of having the inventory of a carburetor if you're not going to use it? So anyway, give me a few minutes to think about this. Check it out, got me a monster turtle here. I think he's setting up for an attack. And that's a good sized creature. That's 1 foot. Wow, that's a lot of turtle. This guy doesn't hinge. I don't think you hinge. You alive? I hope you're alive. Anyway, so I think this would be considered a bladling turtle. So anyway, buddy, go find someplace else to be. I've had this carburetor off, and I went through a cleaning, and though it's running very rich and it looked really pretty clean, the idle circuit had a little dirt in one of the jets, the center one. Other than that, the carb really looked pretty good, but they've been having trouble with this carburetor before I got to it. Once again, back to the noticing things, and they had the idle mixture jet turned all the way in. The needle valve was turned all the way in tight. So they obviously had some trouble with this thing before. A lot of times a carburetor problem could look or it could appear to be a carburetor problem, but it could be valves are too tight. So I checked the valves, and the intakes were a little tighter than I run them, especially for an old engine that I'm trying to get started. So I loosened them up a little bit. The exhausts were fine, right? This thing is a two valve engine overhead cam. Two valves per port, four valves, right? Two intake, two exhaust with an overhead cam. So anyway, I loosened them up a touch, and they feel a lot better. But the thing is still not quite right. Let me show you what I have. Okay, at this point it will kind of start with the choke. I don't have to hit it with starting fluid, so we got that much going in the right direction. Okay, I'm not running a gas tank on this thing. And when I first started it, the carburetor was quite full of fuel, right? The second time I started it for you guys, there was less fuel. So I think my problem is this carburetor, the level is not in a good place. It's probably not quite flooding because I don't see gas all over the place. But if I had the gas tank on with all the pressure of the gas tank, it would be there'd be too much fuel. I did check the needle valve. You know, you put a clean hose on there and you blow into it with the carburetor normal, and you know, with no fuel in it, you hear the hiss, and then you turn it upside down and you blow into it and it stops, right? It pushes against you. You don't hear any air, and you don't feel that, oh, this thing is leaking by. I'm going to change out the carburetor, right? If we want to get this thing to daily rider status, you need to be able to walk up to it, turn the key, set the choke, push the button, and go out for a ride, right? There's no use for this thing. It's basically a parts bike if it's not going to start, run, and ride. So I'm going to swap out the carburetor, and I know a lot of you guys don't like it, but I'm going with the PZ27 swap. There is a little bit of a problem with that because I think the PZ27 is going to stand up too tall, which means I'm going to have trouble putting the gas tank on it, which means I might have to put a different gas tank on it. But I have a tendency to get things back to where I was when I was a kid. If I was a kid and I could either save my pennies for the next 100 years and ride a proper 300EX, or I could put a lousy gas tank on it and a PZ27 or 30 carburetor and ride it today and ride it for the entire summer, I would have a tendency to go with the cheap plastic gas tank, the PZ27, and get out there, right? I might not be the fastest 300EX in the world, but I'd be out there riding the heck out of it and enjoying myself. Philosophies, eh? Okay, tubers, you can see we did the PZ27 Hack. We got the portable CDI box on there. Let's give it another try. I have to admit that I started it before. I'm going to start it for you now, and it doesn't sound right. I had blamed it on the carburetor. Maybe that's not it. Maybe they timed it up wrong. You guys will let me know what you think. This is kind of part of the problem when you get a bike that somebody already worked on the engine, right? there were a couple of characters that said, quote, "We rebuilt the engine." It doesn't appear to be smoking, so if they just smashed valves into it, that's good. But that also means they had it apart enough where it's like, what else did you do to it? What else did you screw up? I don't know. What do you guys think? I checked the valves. The valves are good. I'm wondering if the timing is maybe they are one step off on the timing chain. Seems like when I give it gas, it like, you know, thinks about it. Even when I clicked the choke up a notch, it seemed to think about it. It seemed to be perhaps like acting like it was a little rich, but maybe not rich. I'm thinking when they put it back together, they might have timed it wrong. Normally, what one should do, and probably what I'm going to do, is we're going to go through like a complete setup. I got this thing running, you know, it came in, it had a spark problem. I put the portable CDI box on it, I got it fired up, and I stopped there the first time. This second time, you know, obviously I got it fired up. I got the, rebuilt the carburetor, cleaned the carburetor, and it was still running strange, like a little bit rich. So I did the PZ27 conversion on it, and it's still not quite right. I did discover that the intake valves were a little tight. The exhaust valves were just fine. So now there's still something not quite right with it. I think I'm going to start by checking out the engine timing. I'm going to do a leak back test on it to make sure the valves are actually closing. And after those two things, I think I'll have a little better idea of what's going wrong with it. But you can see it's kind of got that chunky sound to it. It almost like loses spark. So maybe the pulse generator is no good. Maybe. I don't know. It runs the same way with both of my CDI boxes, exactly the same way on the portable CDI boxes, so I don't think it's that. It can't be any of the interlocks or their CDIs or anything because they're not in the equation. What do you guys think? A little bit of a mystery here. What's wrong with this? Why is it running bad? Anyway, so here we have, this is the mighty ugly Honda TRX300EX that's running poorly. What is it? This bike does have real nice tires on it, and it does have a VIN number. So no matter what, with this engine or another engine, it's going to run. It's just a matter of getting it there. Anyway, folks, I want to thank you all for taking this little ride with me. Please remember, feet down, heads up, and get out there and enjoy each and every day. Bye now.